Amazing. So I'm going to introduce a little bit about Beat Freaks and who we are. So like I said, I'm general manager at Beat Freaks. We have been founded since 2013 by Anisa Moradadi. She was a recent business graduate from Aston University. And when she graduated, Anisa spent her time in two main places. During the day, she was meeting a lot of business leaders, policymakers, influential people, the power of the city. And who kept talking about wanting to speak to young people. And in the evening, Anisa was running dance classes. She's originally a dancer. And she was meeting lots of incredible, amazing young people who were really excited about their futures, about making change, about having impact, but didn't know where to channel their desires. So there was a gulf in the city, a gap in communication. So she decided to hold an experiment, and it's one of my favorite things to this day. She rented out a coffee shop on Colmore Row. I think she actually was able to hustle it for free. And at 6 p.m, the suits and boots would get kicked out and the young people would turn up. And the idea was for her to see if young people cared, if they turn up, if they had anything to say. So what we were able to do, that experiment is now called Poetry Jam. It runs on the first Thursday of every single month up until today. We're now homed at the Symphony Hall, which is a phenomenal, beautiful space in Birmingham. And we see roughly 80 to 150 young people come through those doors just to tell us what they care about, what's on their mind at the moment. And it allows us to keep our finger on the pulse continuously. 8 years on, we describe ourselves as an engagement and insight agency. But that core idea of platforming young people to talk about their ideas and lived experience is still at the very heart of Beat Freaks. So we're a youth engagement, an insight agency. And in the last year, we've worked with over 50,000 young creatives. And yes, I can proudly say that is through the pandemic year. Across the UK, we connect them to brands, to government and funders, so that together they can challenge the way the world works. The model of how this works is simple. The more young people that exercise their influence, the more relevant institutions become, and both party wins and society becomes more democratic. Whilst young people gain skills and experience through influence in decision-making, organizations can make themselves more relevant by benefiting from the insights and knowledge of our next generations. And by working, and now all for young people, last year alone, we mobilized a digital reach of over 1 million people to engage tens of thousands, 16 to 25-year-olds on our projects. These projects are specialized and bespoke, but always involve connecting young people and organizations. Sometimes it's authentic co-creation sessions, for example, connecting 30 young people with HS2 to co-design the public space in Curzon Street Station when it opens. And sometimes it's youth governance, recruiting and managing 45 young people from across the region to form a young West Midlands Combined Authority, who govern decision-making alongside the Combined Authority Board. Sometimes it's bespoke research, partnering with Aston Villa Football Club to discover what fandom means and how we can use it to engage people in women's football in particular. And other times it's user-generated content campaigns, partnering with TikTok to upskill users and get them thinking about critical thinking by creating content with young people. So that's a little bit about us. And I feel like I'm gonna shut up. But if you want to know more about Beat Freaks, head to beatfreaks.com. And right now, I'd love to introduce Fabio Thomas, who is our insight manager at Beat Freaks and manages our national youth trends and can give you a bit of background on the creative commissions. Hi, Fabio.
Hi, folks. Thank you so much, Amira, for that amazing introduction. And firstly, welcome, everybody. Thanks so much for coming. It's really, really great to see so many faces bright and early on a Wednesday morning. Amira had, she said, we described it as a breakfast briefing, but we couldn't quite afford 53 breakfast vouchers. So apologies on my behalf. But maybe next time, maybe when we're doing one in physical space, then we'll get some breakfast in for everybody. So I'm sure many of you know a little bit about National Youth Trends as sort of readers of the DL and people who consume content on the website. For those of you who don't, I'm going to give you a little bit of background. Hopefully it'll frame today's proceedings a little bit better and help understand sort of what it is that we've got going on and what this sort of, I suppose, magical combo of data and creativity that we keep talking about really is. So National Youth Trends is an engagement and insight project spread right across the UK with 16 to 25-year-olds, all about pop culture, social issues, digital culture, the things that young people live, breathe, do every single day. Our aim is to sort of package these up to find out about how young people feel, what young people do, what it means to be Gen Z living in 2021, and put that forward to organizations, to businesses, to government, to funders, so that we can better influence the way that products, services, the world is designed to young people's needs. National Youth Trends has had a sort of ongoing relationship with this idea of creativity, and something that we've been really, really passionate about from the offset. We found that the connection between, you know, research, data, insights, policy influence, and creativity, artistic practice, doing things differently, doing things digital, shouldn't be this polarized view that we often view these two sort of elements are. We really think there's an amazing crossover, as some of the panelists are going to increasingly talk about, and it's something at National Youth Trends that we're really, really keen to push forward and to keep discussing and to keep talking about. So whenever, you know, we capture data from young people, we're doing so in ways which we think push forward on traditional methods. So yes, we're using surveys, yes, we're doing focus groups, but we're also running diary projects through WhatsApp, which continue throughout the months. We're also running small pieces of data collection on Instagram. We're also collecting young people's poetry and their stories as data sets and analysing them for current themes and current trends. The way we're collecting data from young people, we believe, is in creative ways, and we think that through doing so, more young people actually want to take part in data collection. More young people want to give their story, want to give their voice, and hence it sort of broadens the diversity and the representation that we're getting in our data sets. So data captured creatively, for want of a broad phrase, is something that's super important. Further than that, as you will have seen, I suppose, over the past six to 12 months through the National Youth Trends website, the way we're communicating data is increasingly creative in nature, and something that we're super keen and super passionate about doing. So yes, as a research project, we publish reports, but if you open them up, you will see that they don't look like academic research reports per se. They're filled with young people's creative content. They're filled with contributions from people from all over the UK in a variety of forms. When we're publishing graphs, yes, we're thinking about data visualization, and we've got, you know, structured, laid out graphs on our website. We've also got young people making TikToks which explain the breakdown of how people answered questions. By diversifying the way that we're communicating our data sets and thinking about creative ways in which we can do so, i.e. through use of new digital media, we're really embedding this idea, okay, what does it look like to think about how we're capturing data, how we're communicating data in a creative sense. Today, I'm absolutely, the first time Antonio and I met, I told him how much of a big fan of his work I was, and I'm so, he's going to do that. We're so excited to launch our first creative commission with an artist based upon the data sets that we've got. Antonio is going to be able to talk you through a little bit more of that now. So for the first time, I'm so pleased to share Antonio's creative work and hand it over to him. They're about to appear on your screen for the first time ever.
Cool. Thank you for that introduction. Yeah, I feel a bit embarrassed there, but hey, I'm glad you like what I do. So yeah, hi everyone, my name is Antonio Roberts, and I'm an artist and curator based here in Birmingham. Oh, here, look, here's the works. And so yeah, I'm just going to talk to you a little bit of the works that I've made for the National Youth Trends Creative Commissions. So I'm going to talk over it. There's like 4 different works. And the overall title for them is called Pop-Up. Partially, you know, I'm not a young person anymore, but I've been on the internet for so long now, and pop-up ads and just even now cookie pop-ups are just things that are like basically part of our internet experience and remind us that we're partially having our data collected, I think, or that we are being analyzed in some ways. So that's how I was thinking about it. But then, I'm sure, hopefully you've all seen and read the National Youth Trends data throughout the years. There's obviously been many years of this. And, you know, in that there is the quantitative data, which is like the asking questions, giving statistics on each of those, but there's also like these diaries and like the opinions of the young people themselves written in their own way. And so looking at how do I represent that and in a visual way. Like, I didn't necessarily want to have like just graphs and charts. You know, those have a place for sure, graphs and charts, but it's not like I don't think that's like a very creative way, and doesn't tell a story in a very human way. Like, it just sees everything as number and data. When it's still people. So my first starting point was really I started with emoji because I think emoji is a very good way, used by adults and young people, to express abstract ideas. Like, it crosses generational boundaries and age boundaries as well, the use of emoji to express ideas. So I felt that like a lot of the emoji, like there's over 3,000 emoji now in existence, and Twitter have a really good like Creative Commons licensed emoji set, which is what you're kind of seeing here, the ones that are being used. Most of them are. And so then I looked through each of the looked through the data set that Beatfreaks has. And I was thinking, like, okay, do any certain emoji relate to some of the questions? And yeah, there were definitely some relevances to them. Like, for example, in this one's talking a lot about diet. So there's many emoji about food and diet. But then I'm thinking, okay, I've got these icons. And so this is where I took kind of creative license a little bit. In data, especially with graphs, you'll have icons or numbers, objects being placed on an axis, an XY axis, and there's sort of an axis here. So really, as these icons, these emojis start to inflate, their position, their height, in relative height, kind of represents their importance within the data, or their occurrence within the data, or even just how important they were to people. So, for example, in this one that you're seeing here, it's about climate change, and so here, like, people, it's hopefully showing that people value the climate and value biodiversity, and have concerns about the climate, the weather, but that also cars, fossil fuels aren't as well. It's not that like it's important in the sense that they want it to be lessened, but it isn't something that they want to contribute to. So there's stuff about owning a car and how much people are flying, and so yeah, all of them. I like balloons, so that's another reason why they're balloons. But it just shows that, like, you can see each of the data points rising and inflating to represent their importance. So yeah, that's again partially like how it all came together. And this, I hope, at least, just even if you don't necessarily see it and go, oh yeah, there's definitely this question being asked, or this, it relates to this specific data point, it at least, I think, helps to show data in a little bit of a more human way, and just to give a general macro view of things, and to help support the youth trends data. Like, I think these work together with it, and that you would see all of them together, the data and these images. So have I said all I wanted to say? I think I might have, but yeah. So, and I'll just say as well, thanks for Fabio too for inviting me to make these. It's been really an eye opener. Like, I've known of Beatfreaks for so many years, worked with people in various ways on Beatfreaks. So I'm happy to be here again on this early morning talking about the work that I've made, and I hope you have all enjoyed viewing the work. So I'll stop there. Thanks.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And I saw a really big avocado at one point, which I think is great. Yeah,
well, that's that breakfast we haven't had. Yeah. So there's your avocados. But still, it's health is important to people, and especially within the data, it's kind of been represented. At least that sort of self-care, the idea of taking care of yourself and eating good food. So yeah, thanks.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And they will be available on the National Youth Trends website for you to have a look at in more depth. Amazing. We're going to kick off with the panel now. I'm going to ask the panelists to each introduce themselves, and then we'll go into questions. Do keep thinking whether that's a question directed at one panelist, or a general question, or a question to Beatfreaks. Have a think of them, post them in the chat. They won't distract us. Fabio is dealing with all of that, and we'll sift through as we are talking and chit-chatting. Amazing. I'd love to go to Hannah first. Could you introduce yourself and the wonderful things that you do?
Sure, thanks ever so much for inviting me. So my name's Hannah Redler-Hawes. I am an independent curator and I'm also the director of the Open Data Institute's Data as Culture art programme, which is the capacity I'm here today. So the Open Data Institute is an organisation founded by Sir Tim Berners-Lee and Sir Nigel Shadbolt, who is, you probably know Tim Berners-Lee invented the World Wide Web. Nigel Shadbolt is a professor of web science. And the ODI is a research institute. It exists to make data work for everyone. It has a very broad business that is not specifically to do with art. But from the get-go, the organisation had an art programme right from day one, which was founded by the artist and computer scientist Julie Freeman. And Julie invited me to work with her a couple of years in, and we co-directed the programme for a while, and she stepped back recently to concentrate on her own work, and I now lead it. And what we do with Data as Culture is to respond to the work of the ODI, which tries to make data work for everyone in an equitable and an ethical way. And we invite artists to create work that considers critically the way that data affects and reflects our lives. And we work with emerging artists, we work with internationally successful artists, we work with a huge range of different artists to create works that, yeah, I'll probably tell you a bit more about later, but they range from things that may look like data visualization to things that are nothing like it.
Amazing, thank you. And it's Hannah Redler-Hawes, because I did it in the briefing. I was like, I really don't want to get anybody's name wrong, and I did.
Oh, it doesn't matter. It's whatever.
I always say my name is wrong, even if I tell you the way to say it, because it's in Arabic. It's just like, there's no way you can say it. So just
well,
say
I probably pronounce my own name wrong because Redler is an ancient German word, and I definitely don't have that accent. So.
Thank you so much. And you will hear more from Hannah in a bit. We want to go to Tom. Tom, could you introduce yourself and the wonderful things that you do?
Sure, and yeah, thanks Beat Freaks for having me today, and it's great to be on a panel with Antonio and Hannah. And Antonio, loved your artworks. I was just experiencing for the first time like everyone else, but it's nice to have some kind of emoji balloons to warm up my morning. Yeah, so my name's Tom Cahill-Jones. I'm the Partnerships Manager for the Creative Industries and Policy Evidence Centre, which is based at Nesta. Now, I don't know if people know what Nesta is, but it's the UK's innovation agency for social good. So we have a number of particular missions that we focus on. The three that are right at the top of the pile at the moment are looking at a fairer start for everybody, allowing people to have healthier lives, and thinking about what it means to have a sustainable future. But within that, there's a part of Nesta which focuses on creative industries, so the role that creative industries play across those missions, but also looks at the health of the creative industries as a sector itself. So the point of the Creative Industries Policy and Evidence Centre is to produce the highest quality evidence to make the strongest arguments to be able to support policy change in the creative industries. And that means that we work across all kinds of different people, people who have got their ears to the ground in terms of what's happening professionally within the creative industries. We work across researchers who are responsible for producing the evidence, and we work across the policymakers who actually can develop the frameworks which can support change within the creative industries.
Amazing, thank you so much. I'm also pretending that the whole Beat Freaks team are not completely fangirling that we've got ODI and Nesta on the same panel. So, but yeah, thank you so much, Tom, and you will hear more from Tom in a bit. And last but by no means least, Antonio, you gave us a little bit of insight into the work you created for us, but tell us about you and the incredible As We Saw work that you do.
Okay, yep. So I'm still Antonio Roberts, as earlier, and yeah, still artist and curator in Birmingham. And I guess, yeah, most of my work when I'm working with, so I've been an artist now for like at least 10, 12 years, working primarily with video and programming as well. So I do a lot of work using creative coding. And yeah, it concerns many different things, but a lot of it is about demystifying technology, making it so that it's more approachable, and to kind of reiterate the point that computers and everything that we see, what is technology, it's made by humans. So when it comes to things like AI, yes, it's confusing, yes, it's all encompassing, but it's still humans making it and can have a say in how it is developed and how it affects our lives. So that's, I know it's some big questions there and some big things there, but yeah, that's generally what I'm doing. But then also some of my work is like just really, I like making nice, pretty artwork as well. So it manifests itself in that way too. Yeah, I think that's all I'll say. Thank you.
Thank you. And you will hear more from Antonio and the work that he's done with us. Thank you so much for introducing yourselves. I always find that when people introduce, like, it's better for the person's sake, because you're like, everybody wears more than one hat now. So I wear a hijab and a hat, so I wear two already physically. So it's better for everybody to kind of just talk about themselves. We're going to jump right into the questions because we have lots to get through. And this one is for you, Hannah, but for all the questions, if there's anything that anybody wants to jump in on, please do. On your programme at the ODI, you often commission creative work based upon all sorts of data sets. Can you tell us about how this works and what specific role social research data can play?
Okay, so the first thing to say is that we never tell, well, we very rarely tell an artist which specific data set to work with, but we'll set a curatorial theme. So that theme might be around open process. That theme might be around data anthropologies, the humans at the heart of emerging systems. We did a theme about LMAO. We did a theme with Antonio, which Antonio was the guest curator for, around data ethics. So we come up with a curatorial theme like you would in any other, arts context, but then we invite artists who've already made work to show with us, either in our space or, in partner organizations, or to work with us. So increasingly over the years, we've had residencies where artists have got more and more involved in being an integral part of the team. And one of the other important aspects of the work comes out of Julie's personal research, which is she wrote her PhD on data as an art material. And she has identified, specifically for the sake of artists and curators, 25 different data types, which you can see on our Data as Culture website, culture.theodi.org, I think. I can't remember right now. But in that data taxonomy, she breaks down social data to a variety of types, like commercial data, personal data. So commercial data would be produced by or about a corporate entity, personal by or about an individual, which comes on a spectrum of accessibility, like closed and open, etc. How private it is, how sensitive it is. Also social data about a social group or a society, for example, births would be like a social group. Our state data about ruling authority. And in all of those cases, we have artworks that respond to all of those things, but of course, being artworks, they are not direct, and they're not necessarily conveying direct information. They are artworks sort of range from ancient Inca quipu, an exploration of ancient Inca quipu, which is these knots that the ancient Incas created to sort of count corn and stuff like that, or gold. But also they made mysterious narrative quipu. So one group of artists we worked with were exploring narrative quipu sonically and finding structures in it that couldn't be discovered in any other way. We've had knitted jumpers, algorithms, courtesy Antonio and Yaksu, his partner in crime. We've even had artists presenting sphinctographs, and don't ask me what that is. Stand-up poetry. We've had a curtain of broken dreams made entirely of discarded wedding rings, looking at divorce data. We've had a stuffed cat. We've had a belligerent algorithm whose subjective biases will be judging you the whole time you're playing an interactive online game. So really, what happens with the artworks is they do what Antonio's work, amazing work that we've just seen, does, which is suck you in with something wonderful and gorgeous and curious. And so it's not necessarily data first, it's art first, but you get into it and it immerses you in the questions and the issues that critically begin to ask, what is this data doing? What does it mean to me? And what does it mean for wider culture and society? And that is the power of working with artists in this field. I don't know if I've got time to talk about some specific art examples. Is that, yeah, so one of the first projects that was responded to an open call exhibition that Julie ran when she first opened the ODI is a piece called The Obelisk by Fabio Lattanzi-Antinori. And it's an absolutely gorgeous, transparent column, sculptural column, that receives real-time information about crimes against humanity. And it toggles between being transparent and opaque, depending on what information it's receiving. So it's very beautiful and mesmerizing, and you're watching it, but at the same time, there's this understanding that you are witness to real-time disasters, really. So it emotionally sucks you in to feeling a very different response to that than you do just simply seeing a news headline. So Alistair Gentry is an artist who spent 9 months working with us exploring data trust and sharing, and he uses performance in his work. So he created a hot pink puppet robot hybrid homemade AI object that he takes out with him. It looks like a sort of iPad on wheels with gold and pink sides. And he dresses up in a pink GIMP suit to have conversations with people about the data about them. And it's kind of pink, queer, crazy, but it opens up a whole load of issues. And it's actually part of a King's College research project looking at the relationship between humans and cybersecurity. And it's working really well. That's a research project in process. I could go on. I mean, I would like to just mention that one of the commissions from Antonio's program that just launched this year called FairlyIntelligent.tech by the artist A.M. Dark, which is the belligerent algorithm I mentioned. And A.M., as a Black genderqueer person, wanted to explore what would it be like if there was an algorithm that was built on her own subjective biases, built by her own experience in life. And you can go to FairlyIntelligent.tech and you can see if you live up to the algorithm's expectations.
Oh, wow. I have so many questions, and I definitely want, if we're posting all the links, Fabio, in the chat, can we also post them in our team Slack thread, because we'll be delving into that. Thank you so much, Hannah. It's such a huge insight into the work. We're going to Tom now. Tom, your role is about collectivizing an evidence base for the creative industries. We're really passionate about both collecting and communicating data sets in creative ways. To what extent do you think research done like this can help your argument at the Policy and Evidence Centre?
Thanks very much. Really interesting to hear from Hannah. And yeah, that's a big question you've posed there, I think. So as I said before, the way in which the Creative Industries Policy and Evidence Centre works, it tries to connect with 3 broad groups of people. So we're trying to connect with people within the creative industries who will provide us with the information about what's actually happening within the sector. We're trying to connect with researchers who can do something with that information, produce studies or reports, and we're trying to connect with the policymakers who can act on the way the information is being presented in the study. So essentially, we're looking at a kind of a model where we're focused on not only the input, but we're looking at what you do with that input, and then how that can be presented and digested on the other side. And when you're thinking about how evidence is presented or digested, it's just incredibly important to think about the audience that you're trying to connect with. So for us specifically, our major audience, I guess, is policymakers in central government, but we are also interested in connecting with people who generally work in the creative industries. But if I just take the example of policymakers specifically, yeah, the thing you're mentioning in your question there are certain expectations around the way in which data might be presented in order to bring about policy change. So I'll just put I can put a link to the Creative Industries Policy Evidence Centre in the chat here. So look, what am I doing? Hold on. Hope this goes to everyone. Yeah, that's gone through. If you go to our website, you'll see we've produced a number of studies, reports, and policy briefings. And those are the kind of outputs which at the moment really resonate with policymakers. So if you're trying to produce an argument to bring about change within the Department for Culture, Media and Sport, they might be interested in the topic generally, but in order to bring about a specific piece of legislation or a specific change, they sometimes need certain pieces of data which are presented in a particular way. But that's quite a narrow conception of the ways in which data can work, which is kind of what Antonio and Hannah have been talking about previously. So one of the things we've been exploring is the ways in which we can expand the way in which we might present our evidence in order to better engage with policymakers. Alongside the reports that we've produced, which are digested by people, we're also working within the topic of climate change to produce experiences which allow people to understand the breadth of the data which is available around climate, and through that create a conversation around what needs to happen in the future. So if I was to summarize this, I'd say there are certain formulaic ways of presenting and digesting data which are well understood by policymakers, but the expressive qualities that the arts bring allow the argument to be opened up in a wider way, which then allows for different types of arguments to be made and hopefully bring about even deeper change in the future.
Amazing, thank you. And it's something you just said there that really resonates, which is like how data should and always should be the start of a conversation rather than kind of an output, like, and art allows it to be the start of a conversation.
And definitely for us, because we're interested in making sure that we have the highest quality evidence to present to policymakers, but sometimes when you're looking at the data that's available, it's very fractured or it's inconsistent, and that in itself is quite interesting from a sort of a creative or artistic perspective. The fact that what's actually out there at the moment is not 100% verifiable. So I think there's this space to inhabit and investigate, which is somewhere around the expressive quality of what the arts can do and the objective or statistical quality, which maybe resonates with certain people who are making decisions within the political world, and that there needs to be sort of a marrying of the two in some sense.
Oh, amazing, thank you. Hannah, we can see your hands up.
Yes, I just wanted to say, playing to that, the project I mentioned by Alistair Gentry, DocsBox TrustBot, which we're researching with King's, involves one of the things we've done with it, with the King's researchers, is build a questionnaire about cybersecurity that Alistair built into the script, and he did online DocsBox encounters with volunteers in this process. And so these questions, which had been are very carefully constructed by the researchers with an outcome expected, were put through the process of the DocsBox experience. And what we found in gathering the data from the answers is, first we did a recording and made a transcription, and we started going through what that data told us. And halfway through, Alistair and I, who had been we'd been there in the recordings, suddenly said, wait, this isn't giving us accurate data, because actually when that person said, I feel really uncomfortable, they were laughing and shaking their head. And so suddenly we went back, we agreed to go back to the data and actually start to look at the audiovisual data as well as the verbal data. So that is actually transforming what findings we're going to take away from that process. So it really, what you've said, Tom, really resonates, that it's about continually thinking, let's not rely on one output, let's think about the implications and it keeps on sort of rippling out.
Absolutely, and I think we've got a group of industry champions who represent different parts of the creative industries, and one of those is Stephen Bennett, who's the co-head of the Policy Lab in central government. So I don't know if people have come across Policy Lab before, but if you're in the audience and you're interested, do check them out, because they're looking at more left field ways of developing policies. And Stephen's particular Stephen's an industry champion. His particular approach is based on the insights that fine art can bring to policy development. And he's recently had an exhibition in Bethnal Green in London, where he's been looking at, I was saying before, the ways in which climate change data can be presented in order to broaden perspective. So I went to that exhibition just like a personal reflection, and through that experience, I got a much deeper sense of the ways in which climate change is playing out globally than even you just get through the through newspapers or sort of internet media. I think it's that sort of immersive experience that art can bring that allows you to really inhabit a topic and understand its depth, and that's something you can't. You can understand certain things from a written report, but you can't really understand that in an emotional way. And humans are emotional beings, and it's so important to have that dimension of the policy discussion. So I think that there's just a question here from Theo. If I could pick that up, is that all right? Or
yeah, although we will be coming back to questions.
You move on. Yeah, that's fine.
We'll pick it up in a second.
Yeah.
I want to go to Antonio, and then we'll pick up panel conversations. Antonio, even when I read this question, I was like, oh my God, where do you even start? But digital and glitch art is a very DIY culture. Part of the reason for this is greater access to digital space and platforms. In recent research, we found that 9 in 10 members of Gen Z consider themselves as creative. Do you think the DIY nature of social media is the cause for this?
Ooh, well, as a member of Gen Z myself, no, I'm definitely not a member of Gen Z.
Almost.
But yeah, I think you've hit on something there quite a lot. Like, so just to say, you know, I didn't mention what glitch art is, but glitch art is people making art from errors. So anytime you've seen anything that looks a little bit like it's broken, or, you know, any sort of graphics like that, that's glitch art. And really, I found my way in the art world through the glitch art scene, which in itself, this was back in 2009, 2010. And again, that was a very DIY scene, which really was facilitated by the internet. It wasn't really like there wasn't an institution, shall we say. There wasn't any leaders. It was more just communities of people gathering around around topics which interest them, which to be fair, at the time, glitch art was quite niche. So to be able to have the internet facilitate this, to facilitate people to be able to get involved in that and really make creative things, I think speaks to also how it's happening at the moment. So yeah, like the amount of yeah, again, I don't do TikToks, but I like watching them. They're really great. You're not going to see me dance, never. Those days are over. But like seeing people be creative in that way, and sometimes it's you know, being creative just for the sake of it, dancing for whatever. But you know, sometimes people are making really great political or important points about social impacts, social things on using this medium of dance. So yeah, in that sense, the tools that are out there, whether they be free, open source, or commercial platforms, are really allowing people to express their creativity for an audience and to just like get a community around that of like-minded people. Some of them they may never meet, some of them are friends down the road. And so to that extent, I can see why people might be considering themselves creative. I think it's a broadening of the term and a broadening of the outputs. So again, like you might not go to school or university to learn how to do TikTok dances, but I wonder if that's a thing. I bet it's going to be a thing soon. Give it a year. But you know, you're not going to necessarily go to school to learn that. You'll still go through the motions of learning, you know, form, function, color, paint, color theory, etc. But there are other ways to express the creativity and other tools. So I can see, yeah, the broadening of the outputs and the term of what art and creativity is, and just having that, like it's for better or worse, the internet is kind of in ways unrestricted, and you know, there's that you can express the creativity that you have without filter, without needing necessarily permission. So yeah, I definitely, yeah, I can see why people consider themselves creative, and I'm also happy that there is you know, out there's that it can be a sustainable thing in many ways. Like there are, as I said to you before about how there are communities that support this, there's financial incentives to it as well. There are people who will support you in making more of the things that you love to do. So, you know, it isn't that you just need to be aiming to exhibit at galleries in order to be creative and to have that. No, there are like if there's a topic, there is a festival for it, there is a event for it, and so you can find yourself. I keep mentioning TikTok dances. I can't think of any other thing, but yeah, you can find yourself being a superstar TikTok dancer, even if that might not be what you may have been taught about as being art. So yeah, no surprise that people think more people consider themselves creative, and more power to them. Change the definition, mess it up, change it up.
Can I jump into that?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting what you've just said. And I think one of the things that network culture has given people is not only an audience, but also finding your tribe. And it's definitely, I'm in my early 50s, and it has definitely, so I've watched this whole thing growing through my professional life. It is so different to be a young artist today than to have been a young artist in the 1980s, where literally, unless someone came and discovered you and said, you can come in my show, which was very rare, it was just really hard to see where to go. So I think that is really great. I also think, I know there's a lot of concern about validation and the emotions of notifications and all of that, but actually when people like something you've made, it's a wonderful, wonderful feeling. I also think it's really interesting what Antonio said about the education system, because I mentor a young person through Arts Emergency, and she's among many young people I know at the moment who are really agonizing about whether to go for an art education or a science education. And I think that we've really got some work to do to make education suit the generation we have now, who are much more, diverse in their thinking, much more interdisciplinary.
And actually, we're sorry, Amira, and then I know we're getting to the next question, but even on that, thank you. But even what you're saying there, Hannah, about what they're deciding, they're agonizing about whether to go into science or to art. Like, so I did I study art? I think I did, but like my my education has definitely revolved around technology. So as I even said to you, like I make art using programming. Like it was definitely a thing that I learned through being part of different communities, the live coding community, the glitch art community. These are communities that are built around people tinkering with hardware and software. It isn't necessarily, I know that's definitely a thing that fortunately there is more of that. There was more of that within education, but certainly, Hannah, you were talking about in the 1980s, but even in the early 2000s when I was studying, this was still a very new and emerging thing. Like it was hard for me to get support within my education at that time to explore the intersection of science and technology. It was really difficult. So I'm glad there was more and more of that. And like you said, finding your tribe, finding your community and audience helps to push you along. So yeah, you're right. There is definitely some work to be done within formal education, but again, it's getting there. I think it's getting there.
Yeah, no, amazing. And I think one of the things that we're really interested in, and part of the reason why people can't name what exactly Beat Freaks does is because we mold and change with the need of young people constantly. And one of the biggest things, like 9 out of 10 young people saying they consider themselves creative, is huge. And one of the biggest things that I guess we're questioning at the moment that I'd like to throw before we go to the floor is how arts organizations take on and use this definition of being creative to improve their engagement on projects. That's to anyone.
Well, it's nice to kind of be back in Birmingham, because I spent some very formative time in Birmingham around the turn of the millennium. Well, actually, I lived in Birmingham, but I was working in West Bromwich with Jubilee Arts which was a community arts organisation. And they changed my world, because I did art school, I did a master's at the Royal College of Art. I then ended up at Jubilee Arts, where everything they told me was stuff that hadn't been discussed in the art school system I went for, that everyone has the right to participate in the cultural life of the community, that using new tools to democratize culture. They did projects like a project with South Asian women, my mother, my daughter, myself, which created some incredible photographs. And when they tried to bring those photographs to galleries, you know, the sort of answer was, we only deal with contemporary art. Okay, so there's a real, I think, arts organizations recognizing that participation is not an add-on, but is a central strength, is something that has changed in that 20 years. I'm seeing it in all the arts organizations around, that suddenly, you know, there's been a shift from the sort of engagement aspect of things, from being on the side, to sort of people recognizing that it's central. And I think that is slowly changing, as you say, Antonio. I don't know, I don't know if you want me to expand a bit, but.
You can if you want to. Yeah, let's go for it, Hannah. You say.
Well, okay, so let's use as an example Tate Exchange. So Tate Exchange, an entire floor dedicated to collaboration, participation, giving platform to different groups, is an astronomical change from the galleries that certainly I grew up in. Of course, there are still issues, but I definitely think that, and the thing you've said, Antonio, about there's a festival for any subject, I think finding output and finding spaces to exchange ideas and platform your work are the things that give people strength. And this is a really weird thing to jump to, but I think about the Beatles, talk about the fact that before they were super famous, they had played in gigs, they had played thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of gigs with no one listening, you know, so they were really well rehearsed. And making art is not just about creating a thing and then, whoa, it's brilliant. It's a lifelong process. And so part of that process is being able to rehearse at every stage of that. And I think those are the sort of spaces that we need to give young creatives more space to do. And the network, you know, the web does provide that as well.
Yeah, I was going to say all of that, but you said it.
We've spent too much time together.
No, I wasn't, but you said obviously a lot of great things, and yeah, just I won't say much because I know we've got questions, but yeah, the organizations again are getting better at reflecting, if not their audiences, but the places that they're in, like the Birmingham. You know, we're all, well, most of them have been in Birmingham here, but it's an incredibly diverse place, and you need to reflect all of that, and that's diversity of, you know, culture, race, gender, but just the diversity of practices and what people are doing. And I know that requires, not from the artists, but from the organizations, to put in the work there to actually reach out and, you know, do that work more. But yeah, I won't say anything more because there's questions.
There are questions. And I know, Tom, I'm coming to you because I know you wanted to touch on this question, which is, how can we get more people to accept data presented creatively as a legitimate source of insight?
Yeah, I think it's a really fascinating issue, this, that sometimes the way that art or the arts more generally are processed is sort of like a nice to have, isn't it? It's seen as a engagement tool, and it's seen as the sort of the fluff around the serious stuff. But so there is a dimension of the arts which is about engaging people. But I think to speak to that question specifically, what is maybe lacking, and I'm only talking here from the policy domain because that's what I understand, is an understanding of the analytical qualities that artists can bring. And I think Hannah was speaking to this point earlier on about the kind of processes that artists go through in producing their work. It can be quite spontaneous, obviously, but for a lot of artists, their processes are very methodical. They're based on very deep insights, and if we could, you see the end product, and that's the way in which you might engage with the manifestation of their interaction with the data that they're working with. But the actual process they've gone through is probably not far from the kind of experimental processes which people would accept as being legitimate within the scientific community. So I think there's something there about allowing, so the question about data presented creatively as a legitimate source of insight. I think it's about understanding not just the final output, but the process that has got to that point, and giving that some credence. And alongside that, for us, certainly in the Creative Industries Policy and Evidence Centre, there's an interesting tension there between the need to be objective, but also the need to be persuasive. And I think when you think about being persuasive, in a way you're considering the audience that you're trying to engage with, and there are various different forms of artistic expression which can be more persuasive in getting a certain argument across than just raw data sets or the purely written word. So I think my answer to that is understand the analytical processes that artists use, but also just consider this area around objectivity and what it means to be persuasive, and what that means for the audience you're trying to engage with.
Amazing, thank you so much. I'm going to sneak one more question that Fabio's just shut over, but I do want to also say, panelists, if there's a question in there that you're burning to answer, please just type it in the chat. But the question that we're picking up as our final question before we go into thanks and wider things is, how can art and creativity contribute to making traditional research and data more socially just and anti-racist?
Are you going to talk about AM's process?
I was totally going to talk about AM's process. Okay, I'll talk about it from my side, but Hannah, of course, if you want to, then you can as well. Let me just get to the question. So how can art and creativity contribute to making traditional research and data more socially just and anti-racist? So I'll mention this. So with Open Data Institute, I was invited as a guest curator on their for an exhibition last year as part of their data summit, their summit last year, and it was about data ethics. And I guess in curating it, I was thinking about okay, who is when it comes to ethics, who is affected by it? And so I had to really make sure that the artists that were being chosen for that were artists who could actually speak to it, who had a lived experience of being affected by technology, by data, not just people who study it necessarily, not just people who are on the outside and look in at what it's doing to people, more those who are being affected by it. And this isn't to say that, I want those artists who have been affected by data ethics to relive trauma or to have to deal with that, because that's not what I want people to do. But basically just to tell their experience, to tell their story in whatever way they choose to tell their story about, the ethics surrounding data. Because this is the thing with when you're looking at numbers, they're just numbers. You never realize the story of the people behind it. So again, this is what my thought was going into that work. And so, with AM Dark's work, I posted it in the chat earlier, fairyintelligent.tech, and we talked about it a couple of times. I think really that was a very good example of, it took the development process of that was very long because there was a lot of back and forth between the ODI, between myself, Hannah, and the artist, just on representing, being truthful to the artist, but also keeping the company safe. And I think it's, at least from my side of things, there's always the question of, does the data need to be collected? And they're saying, how to make the data more socially just and anti-racist. Some of the data that's being collected, whether that's by websites or by surveys, so does it actually need to be collected? Do we need to know, when we're thinking of AI and all the data that goes into AI, a lot of it will be from people who are incarcerated, but to then be for the data to then be used to track people, especially in policing, and that will negatively affect mostly people of color. So it's does that data even need to be collected in the first place? That's what we could be asking there. And then, of course, is how it's implemented. But I ranted on a little bit there, but I think maybe Hannah might have something more to say about all of that, because again, we both worked on the same exhibition, and Hannah's deal is data ethics.
Well, I think the thing that was really great about AM was that thing that I did reference earlier, where they said, right, well, I'm going to make this algorithm based on my own biases. And it was incredible how challenging it was to come up with an approach. I think I'll just share a specific thing that was challenging, which is AM at first wanted to do a piece that might capture your face or my face, any of our faces, and compare it to a database of people who worked in tech. You can guess the kind of names, and like big tech bro, and say, oh, you look like someone who might not pay your workers a fair wage, or you look like someone who might not have considered the bias inherent in your systems, or something like that. But there became a risk through that certain people might feel defamed by this process. And there we were, unable to proceed with a certain aspect of an idea, and AM overcame that and came up with this absolutely stonking piece of work, which I hope you'll all encounter. But sometimes, what was it the lawyer said, Antonio? He said, sometimes it's more difficult to be challenging than to be illegal, or something like that. It was something like that. So it's back to the structural system, and there's no easy answer. I think it's the slow chipping away, the slow realization, the thinking like Antonio's just outlined, being applied over and over and over again. And it's this slow drip that we have to be the change makers from within, I'd say.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And I do want to say, if there's any questions in the chat that's burning for the panelists, they'll start having a type away now. I want to say a huge thank you to Hannah, Antonio, and Tom. It's been such an incredible conversation. We do have, I can tell you, we have a report launching on the 20th of October this month that is around post-pandemic and coming out of lockdown for young people. So check out that and keep an eye on that. But if you're interested in this and interested in youth trends, we have a download, a DL that lands in our inbox every single month that tells you the hottest topics for young people at the moment. If you want to sign up to that, Fabio's just posted it in the chat. A huge thank you to our funders from Arts Council England, Heritage Lottery Fund, Paul Hamlin Foundation, Act for Change, Martin James Foundation, and the Listening Fund, who without them and their support and their joy at us taking risk and playing with creativity, data, and everything that we do in between, none of this would be possible. Thank you so much to all of you for spending your morning with us. We hope that you've woken up or had breakfast before or going to have breakfast now. Keep an eye out on beatfreaks.com for any new info and national youth trends, which is in the chat, to keep an eye out on all things data and young people. Thank you so much and enjoy your day.